Welcome to Emphasis Added, a podcast by the Houston Law Review about legal issues, prominent lawyers, and the study and practice of law. I'm Matt Shelf.
And I'm Brock Jones. We're your hosts, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to part 3 of Season 4's Law School Real Talk series with the Houston Law Review, where current students in administration share their experiences and advice on how to succeed in law school and beyond. I'm your host, Brock Jones, joined here today by University of Houston Law Center 3L students Andrew Jacobs and Chandler Johnson to discuss best practices for making the most out of law school summer employment and ultimately choosing a full-time opportunity. Chandler and Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks, Brock. Great to be here.
So I know y'all have spent your law student legal careers spread across both clerking and working at firms. What firms and judicial clerkships did y'all spend your time at 1L and 2L summers?
Yeah, so I worked at 2 different large firms here in Houston. I spent my first summer at King & Spalding, did both transactional and litigation work there. Spent my second summer at Bracewell doing all litigation. And then I also was a judicial intern for Judge Charles Eskridge here in Houston in the Southern District of Texas.
Very cool. Very cool. Chandler, what about you?
So I did judicial and transactional internships in my first summer. I clerked at the 14th Court of Appeals and then the Southern District of Texas working for a federal magistrate judge. And then my 2L summer, I was a summer associate at Latham Watkins doing transactional work.
Very awesome. So what would y'all say y'all learned most about your time with those employers over the summers?
Well, I'll speak maybe most broadly first because it sounds like I tried both transactional and litigation work and went towards litigation. Sounds like Chandler might be the exact opposite.
Exactly.
And so, starting broadest first, we found kind of our big picture lane that we wanted to be at. And then I learned a lot about how a law firm works, just how from billable hours to how you reach clients to what the actual work is like. My mom is an attorney. She's worked at a big firm in town for a long time, so I had a sense. But you just learn a ton about how law firms work and what lawyers do, because I think, honestly, in law school, you don't really know what you're going to be doing. And just in the biggest sense, you learn how day-to-day things go.
Absolutely. All the administrative stuff just completely left out in the law school aspect.
Yeah, my biggest lesson that I think I learned was just more about my mindset. I think a lot of law students can get really anxious going into like a judicial or a legal environment and think like, I'm just a peasant and I don't deserve to be here. And when you're in that headspace, it's like really hard to like put your best forward and do the work that you know that you're capable of doing. So I think just remembering that if you weren't ready, you wouldn't have the opportunity, and just kind of getting over that anxiety is the biggest thing that I learned.
Absolutely. That's extremely important too. There's so much talk and, kind of the law school sphere about, imposter syndrome and overcoming that. And I think it's extremely important to keep that in mind.
Yep.
So where will y'all begin your legal careers following law school after graduation this May?
So I'll be at Latham, super excited, in Houston.
Awesome.
And I'll be clerking for Judge Jeff Brown, Southern District of Texas in Galveston. So I get to live on an island for a year, which is pretty fun.
Awesome.
Looking forward to it. And then after my 1 year with Judge Brown, I'll be at Bracewell.
Very cool. Very cool. So I also spent my 2L summer at Latham with Chandler, and I will start there following graduation with her as well. And I spent my 1L summer at Baker Donaldson in Houston doing mostly litigation matters. So Andrew specific, I guess you clerked some as well, so I can ask this to both of y'all. How would y'all say clerkships over the summer really differed from law firm life?
Why don't you go first?
So the biggest thing that I noticed is that when I was clerking, I just was assigned one matter. It was like an appeal. So I was assigned one giant appellate record that I had to go through the entire summer. And then I'd sift through all of that, do some legal research, and then write the legal opinion. Whereas in firm life, I feel like I was bouncing around different types of projects all the time.
Yeah,
Just
lots of different
variety.
ongoing matters and whatnot.
This is interesting and good to learn because I was an intern during the year, which first of all, that was just different being there part-time for Judge Eskridge. But I almost had, again, the exact opposite experience. I felt like at the firm, I was usually one big matter, one big research project at a time. Again, mostly because I was litigation heavy. And then when I was working for Judge Eskridge during the school year, I was working on a couple of opinions at the same time. And honestly, like I had great experiences at both my firms, but I think the amount that I learned about how to be a good litigator and how to be a good advocate at Judge Eskridge was like leaps and bounds more than my experience at firms. I just think being in a courtroom, seeing how their judge works, seeing how their clerks work, all the procedural matters, I had no idea how to file different things, how they're docketed, how they're reviewed by the court. So I would highly recommend anyone that wants to be a litigator to consider interning for a judge. Very doable during the year, during the semester, super accommodating during the summer if you want to split ever. I just think there's no way to faster know the entire court process than being an intern for a judge. So I love my experience.
Absolutely. And as someone with an entirely transactional background myself, I'm very unfamiliar with that kind of work. But
and I'll say if same for people that go on the fence. I think if you intern for a judge and you're between litigation and transactional practice, you'd figure out pretty quickly if that's for you. If seeing all these court dockets and how much you have to read and write and research. If that's not for you, you'll figure out pretty quick.
That's exactly what happened to me. I was very much on the fence of whether I wanted to do litigation or transactional work. Like I did a little bit of litigation work in college, but I didn't really get to experience it. So I think that was like one of the best things about clerking my one all summer. Like, yeah, I didn't get paid, but I really got to learn like what litigation was like and realized that it just wasn't for me.
Absolutely. And that kind of ties me to my next question, specifically Andrew, but why did you decide to clerk after graduation? Was it just to get some of that extra like real life, real court experience before getting thrust into a law firm life?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts about judicial clerkships, as I think most people probably do. So I think everyone has their 2 cents, but I'll give a decently long-winded answer to that question. So I have reasons for taking the job itself, and then kind of secondary reasons for where I think it would lead me kind of my career long term. So the job itself, everyone that I've ever talked to, everyone that I've ever heard at a panel that clerked for a judge after graduation said it was the best year of their legal career. And I was thinking about that on the way over here, preparing for this, why I think that is. I think a clerkship kind of gives you the best combination of pushing your limits and a place to grow, but also taking a little less risk than maybe a law firm. What I mean is at a law firm, if you're being pushed for sure, like you need to do really good work and it's hard and difficult work. But there's this anxiety if you mess up, like it could cost a company $10 million. And that's really scary for someone that, took the bar yesterday. At a clerkship, I think it's still scary. You're deciding cases, you're helping write opinions. That's intimidating. Like I'm totally confident saying I'm very intimidated for next year. But at the same time, it's a small environment. Judges looking over everything you're doing. You can talk to your peers, other clerks. So I feel like I'm not going to try to make mistakes, but I think there is a little room to make mistakes, a little room to grow. So that's why I'm really excited is I think I'm going to become a better lawyer, become a better writer, really push myself and feel not as at risk as maybe I would just starting out at a law firm, which is just an intimidating environment as well. So I think that's part of what attracted me to the job. And then just kind of the collegiality of a small chambers environment. So for me, for Judge Brown, there's 3 total clerks, case manager, and Judge Brown himself. And so it's the 5 of us in a beautiful courthouse every day on the island, driving to work, read, write, take a break, read, write. And like, that's all I do all day, every day with those 5 people. And I think that's just really fun. And I'll look back at the end of the year and be like, man, remember this case, remember this, maybe crazy advocate, maybe remember these things, and we'll all be there together. So that's really exciting. Why I'm excited to clerk. And then a few reasons, just kind of long term. I've been told, and kind of the advice that put me over the line to accept my clerkship and really pursue it wholeheartedly, was that your first year at a law firm is really important. And so if you're a first year associate, you're trying to put your best foot forward. Your reputation as an associate that can handle certain types of work in that first 6 months to 18 months is pretty important. And so I would just feel more confident after clerking for a year, be like, okay, I know what I'm doing, or at least a little bit more than I did. I'm confident on these types of projects. I can speak to how, the judicial process works. So I'm just excited that I feel like my first year at Bracewell, hopefully I can kind of excel and get more matters and get more trust from people there. And then even longer term than that, again, I plan to be at Bracewell. Feels like home. It's where I plan to be. But there are a lot of paths that I think a clerkship would open up. Teaching is certainly one of them. If you look at U of H faculty, the full-time faculty, a huge percentage of them clerked at one point or another. There's just other things that you can do if you've had that experience on the judicial side. So this is a long-winded answer, and I'll conclude by saying I think applying to clerkships is a super individualized process. And I think, I'll speak for me, I saw it as like this all or nothing thing. Like, okay, I'm either going to clerk or go to this firm. I'm either going to like forego all this money, and leave it aside for a year and have to move or all this. And I took a really personalized approach, and I knew I wanted to be close to my family. I didn't really have a huge appetite of leaving Texas. So I applied to a very narrow set of judges, and I was happy with, this is who I really want to work for. If it doesn't work out, I'm happy to be at Bracewell. And so I think people take the approach of, well, I have to apply to 40 judges, and I have to be willing to move to a town I don't want to move to. I personally don't think that's the case. I would advocate to apply to as many judges as you can if you're serious about clerking. But if you don't want to live in, XYZ small town, or you don't want to leave Texas, or you have a fiance or family here in Houston, then apply to Houston and Austin and Galveston, and call it quits there. So I'm happy to talk clerkships as much as we can, but that's my 2 cents on the clerkship angle.
Good deal. I appreciate that. I mean, I have literally zero background or knowledge of the clerkship process or any of that at all. So I really appreciate you being able to share some of that.
Yeah.
So jumping into some of the substance here, I wanted to start by talking about employers' expectations of law students' work over the summer. So legal employers understand that law students will not be able to do a lot of associate level work starting off, especially in more transactional roles where like the entire transaction process is completely foreign to even a law school graduate. Still, there's some crucial skills I think supervisors are evaluating throughout the summer. What do y'all think are some of these skills and behaviors that are crucial to master that these supervisors are looking at?
I really think the biggest thing, especially in transactional work, right? Because like law school does not prepare you to do transactional work whatsoever. So you truly do go in like a fish in water, like absolutely nothing. So I think what they're really trying to look for is if you have a positive attitude and if you're willing to learn. Having those 2 skills, I think it just will take you so far.
Absolutely. I 100% agree.
Yeah, I'll echo on the willingness to learn. I think a great skill to develop is when to ask for help and when to ask questions. And it's not always right away. So I think there's a balance of, you get a project, feel like fish out of water, you don't really know which way to turn. Take some time, take a deep breath, get as far as you can, kind of know what questions you need to ask. And then when you're like, okay, I've looked at the obvious things, I understand the basic nature of this, but I'm really running against a wall. Then like think of thoughtful questions and then go back to your partner or signing attorney, whoever, and go from there. Like it's much better for you to spend 5 minutes of your time and 5 minutes of their time, ask the right questions, and then your next, 6 hours of work is that much more efficient. Yeah. So learning to know when to ask questions is huge.
Absolutely. We'll get into some of that more later, is like the communication aspect of working at a firm. And I'm sure clerkship too is just so important. Yeah. Because they really understand that things come up and whatnot.
And then I'll add just being a good writer and working on your writing skills. I feel like that's said so much in law school, and it frustrates me because it's like, okay, well, what does that mean to be a good writer? But it is an important skill, especially on the litigation side. And I think personally, I just think it comes with practice. So the more you read legal briefs, write stuff, your own, read different opinions, you just naturally get to be a better writer. So I don't have any tips on like what to do other than like just keep going and you'll develop your kind of writing style.
I've been sending some stuff back to younger students, some 1Ls and whatnot, looking back at some of my writing from 1L year, and I'm just like blown away at how much it's changed just because of the constant writing we have to do for exams, for everything all the time.
It truly just takes time, and I think reading great writing really helps. Like that's one of my favorite parts about running the law review is that all I do is read law review articles all day. So I feel like my writing style has developed into more like an academic thing just through osmosis and like constantly reading law review articles.
Absolutely. So what about the actual work assignments? I know how work is assigned can depend a lot on the specific employer, but at working at firms, I noticed students that didn't really have any earlier guidance on how to handle and engage with attorneys when you're assigned a work assignment kind of fell behind because they just didn't understand the expectations. Can y'all first explain the kind of tasks y'all might get assigned at a firm job or a clerkship?
Yeah, I can go first. I think probably my most common is a pretty large scale, like big picture research question. So maybe one aspect of a case or one area that's kind of newly developing that a partner or a signing attorney just wants to know more about. So they might ask you to write a memo that's like somewhat formal on some big picture topic. Like for example, I was at Bracewell in the labor and employment group when the Dobbs decision came out this summer, and there were lots of questions on how employers should handle insurance from an abortion standpoint, which is obviously a complicated issue and obviously changed overnight. And so without getting details, I just looked at all sorts of issues related to the decision and insurance and employers, which was super interesting. And I think that was a little unique because it was so timely, like the decision had just come out. But I think it's a good example because it was just like, hey, big picture, like here's like 3 issues, like summarize them for me. So that's generally the type of work that I did as a summer associate in litigation specifically.
Yeah, I feel like my work varied a lot, right? Because transactional, we're doing deals and we're working with a lot of different types of agreements. So for like project finance, I read through a ton of LNG agreements that were like 80 pages long just for like proofreading and grammar, making sure like cross-references were correct. And then for tax, I was researching a lot of like what would be quote unquote like market terms. So when we were negotiating different deals with other firms, like we can say, hey, you did this term in XYZ deal 5 years ago. Like, why can't you agree to this now? And then also for like private equity, I was doing a lot of like closing checklists and just making sure that everything was kind of staying on track. So it varied a lot.
Absolutely. I concur. I mean, we obviously worked together this summer, and that sounds a lot about the breadth of work that I did, but
Yeah.
a lot of just massive variance with just all the different kinds of deals, the different, actors involved, a lot of that kind of stuff. So what are the key questions y'all would say to ask an assigning attorney or assigning fellow clerk, or when you get assigned a task?
Yeah, there's a couple of nuts and bolts that I think you should ask every time. It's like turnaround when you need this by. Definitely should know when they expect a client number or some sort of billing number, however your firm works that out. And then I wouldn't ask this directly, but some sort of like knowing what kind of product they're expecting. So if they're like, hey, this can just be an informal email, or hey, this is a memo and I expect it to be, like 8 pages or more. I wouldn't be like, is 8 pages like a direct question on like length guidelines per se, but I want to know like the type of end product that they're looking for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that list is on the transactional side, we have what we call precedent, which is basically just an example document from another deal that we can use to like kind of help guide us on our little journey of trying to figure out how to do this assignment.
Yeah. And then on research, I don't think it's a bad question to say, do you have a recommendation on where to start? Because if it's something you've never dealt with before, or it's like you barely understand the question being asked, if you ask for a resource, or hey, have you found one case so far, that can at least get you off on the right foot, and I think is a totally appropriate question if you need to ask it.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what I was referring to at the outset of this section, is just some of the people I've worked with over the summers just had no clue. Those were the kind of things you needed to ask when you're assigned something, and then had no clue where to send the bill, had no clue where to even start. We're spinning their wheels for a week, and then they finally asked for a question, and then the assigning attorney is like, oh, I needed this already, or is all upset, and then it's a whole thing.
Like I said, probably the worst thing you do is just spin your wheels and not let anybody know you're struggling. Yeah. Maybe if you don't want to go straight to the assigning attorney for whatever reason, I think most firms have some sort of mentor system, or even your peers are a great place to go. Your fellow summer associates, to be like, hey, do you think this is kind of the right thing? Or am I like in the right zone at least? Your summer associates are surely there to help. And I think by and large are not incredibly busy at most firms. Like, you have time to help your peers.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are scared to ask about that because they just don't want to look stupid, right? Like, they're trying to make a good impression and put our best foot forward. But I think it's important to remember, like, everyone was in that position once. Like, even the managing partner of the firm was a clueless summer associate once, and they just want to help you.
Exactly. It's important to kind of, whether it's a pride thing or a fear thing, you just kind of get over that and just swallow it and be like, yeah, I need help.
Yeah.
I guess that kind of pivots perfectly right into our next part. So do you have any tips for communication with, assigning attorneys? Best practices? Yeah.
So I think we were told this summer, like, it's better to over communicate than under communicate. So like sending updates on, hey, like, I got through like XYZ issue today. Like, I'm expecting to be able to get through the rest of it at this time. Does that timeline work for you? And just like keeping them apprised of where you're at. That way they know kind of where you're going and when they can expect it.
Definitely.
I would totally agree. I guess the only thing I would add, this is general, like any line of work, is what's the phrase? Overpromise and under promise and over deliver. Nail it, right? So yeah, if you're pretty confident, you'll have something done by lunch, but you're not 100% sure, say, hey, I'll for sure have this to you by the end of the day. Give yourself like a little wiggle room to be sure that you cross your I's, dot your T's, and deliver something on time.
It's incredibly important early on, I think.
Yeah.
Too.
Mhm.
And I would just echo again, the partners, even like the scariest, biggest, baddest, whatever you want to call, like partner down the hall was a summer associate somewhere at some time. Like they were a rising 2L sometime too. So it's more than often than not totally fine to ask questions.
Absolutely. I agree. So as we kind of talked about earlier, these summer legal employers really aren't looking for their summer law students to master the substantive tasks of the practice over the summer. However, I think the time spent with these employers is extremely valuable and provides an opportunity to learn stuff that may be more administrative. Could y'all talk about like how students can make the best use of their time over these summers to master these administrative tasks?
Yeah, I think we were told, Brock and I definitely, that if we learn nothing else during the summer, like learn the firm's technology. That way when you come back, you can kind of hit the ground running. You're not like dealing with Scott and IT all day. So I think that's important. And I also just think like use the time to get to know people. I mean, like all of these people are really interesting, fascinating people like inside the law and outside the law. And so just kind of like start building your network. Especially across different practice groups. Like a lot of people go in and think like, oh, I only want to do capital markets work. And so they only network with capital markets people. And then they come back and realize maybe I don't love this as much as I thought I would. And they're kind of having to start from the ground zero, trying to build networks with other groups. So just try and get to know as many people as you can. Especially
because you have like 2 years from when you finish your 2L summer before you like really start basically.
Yeah.
So, or at least a year and a half. So there's a good chance, a lot of the people are going to move around at a certain firm.
Yeah.
So yeah.
As a summer associate, you basically have a free pass to ask almost any question that you want, any appropriate question that you want. Almost. Use your best judgment. But truly, like when you're a second or third year attorney and you're asking like, hey, what's it like to work in this group? Or you're asking, is the partnership path X, Y, or Z? I don't know. People might be like, oh, maybe this guy's trying to move, to a different group, or, is he not happy? There's just, again, I would not ask those questions, but as a summer associate, you're truly there to learn about the firm, learn about the law, learn about yourself and what you want to do. So ask, how does someone make partner? Ask, what's your favorite and least favorite thing about working at this firm? Ask pretty much anything under the sun, because you're there to learn and no one's going to like second guess or look for like an alternate reason that you're asking, because you're there to ask, again, in the balance of like normal, appropriate behavior. I guess also just, this is somewhat obvious, but you're learning what type of law you want to do. We already covered litigation, transactional, but just what interests you. You're going to probably be exposed to only a handful of projects. Like I think the 9 or 10 weeks goes really fast, but you at least know what you don't want to do. And like, oh, well, this is like kind of interesting to me. Maybe I could do something like that again. And this is somewhat separate, but I'll add just how to make your most of your summer. I think one of the huge benefits of going to the University of Houston is, at least for about a majority of us, you work in Houston over the summer and then you're here during the year. And so a lot of kids, from UT or from schools in the Northeast or whatever, parachute into Houston and they got to get out of here. But we can keep up these contacts all year round. And honestly, that's one of my big regrets of law school, is not kind of keeping up with some contacts more. But it's super easy if, you don't have an exam, you don't have anything crazy going on. It's mid-October. You're like, hey, Sally, I love working with you this summer. Want to hear what's going on? Can we get coffee? The firm's going to pay for their coffee. You get free coffee out of the deal.
I still play golf with a handful of associates and get drinks with them on like a bi-weekly basis. Yeah.
And it's just really great to be in the city of Houston, where most of us plan to work, and keep up those contacts. It's more difficult if you're at another school. So I think that's a huge benefit and something that is really easy to do. It's not like, oh, I need to network in my spare time. I mean, that's what you're doing, but it's just someone you had a connection with, catching up with them, having a good time is a great benefit and a great way to kind of maximize that summer experience into the year.
Absolutely. I guess the one thing I could add, kind of piggybacking on Chandler, was iManage.
iManage.
It's our firm's document management database. That was key to mastering. I still have fears of versioning up incorrectly or something.
Yes.
Somebody getting pissed.
I've spent a grand total of 4 weeks in transactional career ever, and I plan to never go back. And I still think about iManage and like how much it was
nightmares.
Not pleasant.
So I also wanted to briefly discuss in-office social outings, that being coffees and lunches that you go on with attorneys. Like you said, kind of getting that experience of, just networking in the office is extremely important, a big part of the summer. So how would you say law students can maximize that aspect of the summer, especially if they're left to schedule these outings on their own?
Yeah, I think just be proactive. I mean, all these people want to get to know you, even like a partner that can be really intimidating to you. Like they were, again, like a summer associate at one point in time, and they just want to get to know you and help you. So just reach out to whoever you feel like reaching out to. Like don't make a big deal out of it. Don't be afraid. They just want to get to know you.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'll speak from my two experiences were fairly different on just how we set up social things, and I think it speaks to just each firm is pretty different. At one firm, it was more kind of self-started. I had to ask people to go to coffee or ask people to lunch, and I just really had to go and ask, and they always said yes. They were always thrilled to go. And then at my other firm, it was pretty regimented. Like we had a lunch calendar, and you were set with a group, and that was great too. So just know that each firm's going to be a little different on how you would do these lunches or coffees, etc. I would give the slight advice, and this is like only in spare time, and definitely don't like be overbearing or overdo this, but to get a general gist of people around you and what they do is somewhat helpful. So, if you have a lunch with Brian scheduled for Friday, like at least know kind of what Brian does and where he went to school maybe. It just makes your questions a little more formative, and you get to think about what they do. And then just be yourself. That's kind of my big social idea, and we've all heard it on any number of walks of life, but people are attracted to authenticity more than anything else, I think. Yeah. So, if you think firm X has culture X, so you need to be something, I don't think that is the mindset to have. I think be yourself. If you're quiet, be quiet. If you're out there, be out there. Just have fun. Like you're there to get to know people and them to know you. And if it's not a good match, then it's not a good match, and that'll be evident, I think. So just be yourself.
Absolutely. And aside from socializing in the office, it really surprised me over the summer just how crazy the out-of-office socialization schedule got, especially after, this past summer when we came off like 1 or 2 years of COVID restrictions and everybody wanted to do every event ever. So could you all tell me a little bit about your experiences with the summer socialization schedules?
Yeah, I'll start it again. Say the benefit of being at two firms is I saw two pretty different socialization schedules. So it's hard to predict like what your firm would be like. So just be mentally prepared that you could have a lot of nights out in a row. And it's really fun, but it can get exhausting. And like, I think I don't know about you guys, but like I live with roommates that are not law students. And I come home and complain. I'm like, oh man, I got to go to this steak dinner again. Like I'm so tired. And you sound ridiculous, but you can give yourself a little bit of a break and know that it is a tiring schedule. Also add again, kind of the unique thing about being a student at the University of Houston is most of us, again, are staying here. So we have our own friends, maybe family, like kind of social network here already. And you got to remember that a lot of kids are coming here. They're in Houston for 9 weeks. They don't know anybody else. And so they don't have anything else in their calendar where I'll just speak for myself. Like my mom's inviting me over for dinner. My girlfriend wants to see me. My buddies want to hang out. And I needed to balance, putting my best foot forward on these 10 weeks. So that's just a little different than if you were going to a different city and didn't know anybody. Just to say to give yourself grace if you're, really burning the candles on both ends.
Definitely. Yeah. I think the way that Latham was structured this summer, we would have like maybe 1 or 2 like formally scheduled events that the recruiting committee put on. But then Brock and I got really close to a lot of people in our class. So we would end up going out almost every single other night of the week too, just to hang out. Even though we were in Houston, we had like our family here, our friends here. I think we had a lot of fun. In terms of prioritizing like which ones to go to, I think definitely prioritize the firm sponsored events just because they put a lot of time and effort and money into planning those. And those are going to be attended by the largest amount of people. And so you'll just have more chances of meeting more people in terms of like managing burnout. Like if you're getting really burned out one week, like go to the firm sponsored event and just kind of like take a night for yourself after that.
Absolutely.
And I'll add, not to speak out of both sides of my mouth, because I just said, give yourself grace and don't go too crazy, but it is only 10 weeks, most of these programs. And unless you have another, second half of the summer or are doing something, a lot of us have a few weeks off between the end of the summer and the start of school. So you can do a lot for 10 weeks and kind of rest after. Balance. I know. I know I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, but you can, get pretty tired by the end and just be like, hey, this is 10 weeks. It's an important 10 weeks. It's 10 weeks you'll never get back. A lot of associates are like, man, to be a summer again is pretty nice.
Yeah.
That's the exact advice I was given at that time. And I, was just told, like, it's 10 weeks, be selfish if you need to, take it. It's going to have a large impact on your future career. And I took it, and, it was exhausting, and I did have to take personal time at times, but it was important just to do as much as I could to get as much networking out of it as possible, make the most out of it.
Yeah.
And a lot that your summer associates, this one part we haven't talked about, are at least a portion of them are going to be your peers for a long time and are going to be people that you're working with, right in the trenches when you start. And so, like you said, you guys were close and went out with just summer sometimes. Like that in itself is certainly valuable in addition to being pretty fun.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We had a great time.
It was a fun summer, a long summer, but it was great. So how do y'all think students can stand out positively to employers, supervisors, attorneys at these events?
I'll let you go first.
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I think going back to having a positive attitude is really important. People want to work with someone that they think is going to be a team player and kind of like roll with the punches with grace. So even though you like maybe worked on an awful deal that day and you're exhausted and you don't really want to be here, just show up with a smile and just try to get to know people, I think is really important. On that same note, like, don't say anything negative about the firm, about the work you're doing. Like, just be excited that you get to have the opportunity, even if you're not really loving one practice group. Say, yeah, like maybe one day, I don't know, just trying to get to know more about everything in the firm. And then obviously don't drink too much. There's going to be a lot of alcohol at all these events, and you could be like really nervous and just accidentally drink too much or go a little bit too far one night. So just be mindful of that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I would agree and just summarize by saying just be present to be around, like as silly or maybe cliche or obvious as that sounds. People say it a lot, but you spend a lot of time in a law firm and a law practice, and so you just want to be liked and be present to be around by the people you work with so many hours. So yeah, all those things, being polite, being a positive attitude, being a team player, coming in, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed as much as you can. Being a nice guy or nice gal. Like I think it's obvious that sounds, but yeah, don't complain, don't back talk about other people, don't ever talk bad about other summers for sure. Just be someone they're like, oh well, this was interesting. I had a great conversation with this person at this dinner. Like that. It's really not that much more complicated.
I really think that's so much what they're like looking for in the summers. They evaluate your grades pretty thoroughly. They evaluate your background thoroughly to know you're qualified, and really they want to see if there's somebody they can spend however long in an office each week with and get along with and work with closely.
Yeah, and all that again, just being authentic. Like I think that people can get in these dinner or bar settings and be like, oh, everyone's gravitating towards this bigger personality person. But so many times someone's like, who's so great is I had this great conversation with this person. They are quiet on the outside, but they're so interesting. And so like if you, are just more wired that way, that you're a little more reserved, I think people really love that too. So again, I don't think any firm is looking for a particular type of person, just personality wise. And so be yourself and people will be attracted to that.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. So as kind of a final discussion point, we've talked so much about summer employers and how they're evaluating, students as candidates for employment over the summer. I think it's equally important to mention that, the students really should be evaluating their employers as a place for a full-time career opportunity as well. So what do y'all think are the kind of the critical aspects to look for as a student evaluating an employer as a place to begin a full-time career?
That's a great question. I think the biggest thing is you have to keep in mind that you're going to spend more time at work in the office than you do with your own family. So if you don't genuinely like the people that you're around, like you're going to be miserable. So I think that's like the first litmus test. Like, do I like these people? Could I see myself being on a call with them at 3:00 in the morning? So I think that's important. Another thing for me was law culture can get really, like, you can get burned out, and like well-being isn't really as talked about as I think it should be in law. And I think that's why a lot of lawyers suffer from anxiety and depression. So finding a firm that was like really committed to mental health and like kind of had an infrastructure in place to help you deal with that was really important to me as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'll say just biggest picture. I think about it as like a 2-step process in terms of picking your firm home. First is like what they do. And so like if you want a specific practice or you want to lean litigation transaction, just the biggest level, that's going to shorten the list a little bit. If you want to be a products liability lawyer, pick, X amount of firms in town that do that and then start there. Then once you are at a firm, I would agree it's just the people and kind of finding a fit. And I think that, by definition, picking a law firm is like a self-selection process. And so if there's a certain kind of big picture culture that people like or don't like there's just going to be more people like that kind of come through. So if you see, 3 people there, they're like, wow, I want to be just like, John and Ted when I grow up, then they're going to attract more people that want to be like them, and they're going to attract people that are like you because you also want to be like them. So yeah, just seeing where you vibe with people, where you don't mind spending a lot of time. And I think that it feels, I felt a lot of pressure, especially 1L summer, that I was going to make the wrong choice, that I, was going to be at a firm, then I was going to be there for 40 years and be like, if I could just go back till 1L, whatever. And we're blessed with so many great firms in town. And I think they are far more similar than different, even though they each have sales pitch. And I'm super blessed and happy to be at Bracewell. I think there are a lot of great choices out there. So don't worry I
Especially in the local Houston market.
Yeah, Houston's so strong. And so you're not going to mess up. And then it isn't forever. I had a fantastic experience at King & Spalding. I wanted to try something else. And so I had 2 different experiences over summer. Brock, you the same. And so, especially that 1L summer just seems so chaotic because you've been in school for 1 semester. And then if you want to do a firm through the OCI process, your head's spinning from Christmas break and exams, you have to make this big decision. And it is a big decision and something you should take seriously, but just know it's not forever and ever and ever until, you're 80 and gray in the hair.
Exactly. I talk to law students about that all the time because they just get so anxious. They're like, I don't know if I want to go to X firm or Y firm, and this is such a huge decision. But it's like, you're not marrying them. Yeah. If you don't like it in 2 years, you can always pivot and go do something else. And who knows, maybe in 2 years you don't want to be a lawyer anymore and you want to go do an entirely different field in life. I think we change a lot as human beings over time. And I think a lot of people forget about that. The
2L decision, I think, is definitely important. But even the 2L decision, you can pivot from, or just take a few years. But the 1L decision, I really think it should be looked at as, a learning opportunity. Find a firm, see if you like it, just completely learn, Yeah.
And a huge opportunity. If you're listening to this in posterity and you have the opportunity to work somewhere as a 1L, that's great. That in itself is great. That's absolutely what you should be celebrating.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Chandler and Andrew, it has been an absolute pleasure. I wanted to thank you for joining me to share your experiences, impart some wisdom on these younger students, having now, I guess what is that, almost 6 semesters in. Flew by, it's crazy. But yeah, I really wanted to thank y'all for taking the time today.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brock. I'll add to conclude that it was strange giving advice where I think for all of us, we've received advice for so long. And so people say, feels like yesterday, and people were like, oh, well, you'll pay it forward one day. And it's kind of odd to already be sitting here and talking about my experience. So if you're a 1L and, you feel like you're going to be here forever, law school goes pretty fast.
Flies by. Yeah. Take advantage of the time you have with your peers, with your friends. It really does fly by.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks again, y'all.
Thanks, Brock.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening. Emphasis Added is a podcast by the Houston Law Review. If you like what you saw, check us out on YouTube or your favorite podcast app.
Follow us on Instagram @EmphasisAddedPod and check out the Law Review at HoustonLawReview.org.